So, Nathan, how did Voteflux actually start? You talked about meeting a few people, and maybe let's start more with sort of what was your sort of motivation in starting Voteflux? What was the reason you sort of got behind it in the first place?
Yeah, so for me, it was really that there was a need for a political movement that just simply didn't exist for me at the time. And I spent the federal election before the current federal election campaigning for the WikiLeaks party because at the time I felt like they were the only organisation that really represented my views in a world that had become so politically narrow and just dominated by these two major parties whose ideologies really have become more and more closely aligned, despite the fact that they will make it seem like there's a big drama, but really, on certain issues, they're very, very closely aligned. And the idea came to me, it was introduced to me by the party's co-founder, Max, and for him, um, it wasn't so much looking at Flux as an alternative, a nationwide alternative to voting at the time. It was more an idea that was around minor parties and how we could help minor parties actually participate in a system that tries to shut minor parties out. So, Australia is a two-party democracy, like most Western nations are, where you have these two sort of megalithic parties. There is now actually, funnily enough, despite the efforts of the federal government to try and keep that the status quo, it's actually changing a little bit, and other minor parties have funnily enough, jumped into the Senate the last federal election. But the idea was basically that how could you have these minor parties, who many of which are single issue parties, participate together, or in a sense share a senator. Okay, so let's say we've got the Bullet Train for Australia party and the Voluntary Euthanasia party. They have completely different agendas. So it doesn't make sense for them to necessarily vote against one another on those issues, but rather that they could cooperate and use that same Senate power, basically, to be able to raise their agenda. So that was the idea, a sort of coalition and a system that would be able to facilitate that so that everyone gets a say and someone actually gets elected, as opposed to spending lots of money and lots of time and not getting elected at all. So Max approached me with that idea, and at the time I thought that's really sorely needed. We just need other voices in Parliament that aren't those of the major parties that dominate and ultimately set the agenda. It's all well and good to have democracy, but if the conversation is so narrowly defined, and you have these two organisations that define what can and can't be talked about, then we're missing out on a whole lot of criticism that we need to have as part of a healthy democracy. So that was where it all began, and for me, I spent most of my early 20s just very, very frustrated, and I was that guy at the party that, after a couple of drinks just wants to talk about politics and how broken everything is, and we've got to fix this, and everyone's like, oh, come on, man. It was just say, Nate, you've got to turn it down, or else, you're gonna alienate all your friends. And I just said, maybe I need new friends. It's like, so, as far as
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was concerned, and still am concerned, we have major problems that we need to address. As we progress as a society, and if we don't start doing those now, the problems that we have are just going to get worse. So that was really where it all began, and it was really through going through the process of starting up the party and really thinking about what this all meant, that we went from a liquid democracy model to something that was a lot more a system that we really thought could completely replace representative democracy as we know it, and not just be like one or two times better, but be like 10 or 20 times better. And that's where really we landed at Flux.
Well, okay, that's really interesting for me because as I mentioned before, I studied liquid democracy in Germany, where it started. And as you know, it's a sort of transitive voting system. So it's a mix between direct democracy and representative democracy, where um, within a party system, a person can allocate their vote to another person in that party. So you get this kind of super delegate process within parties, where a person might have the vote of 10 other friends, and then they have 10 votes plus their own, they have 11, and they can either vote on an issue or they can pass those votes on to even another person. So you have this constant sort of flowing, trickling through the system to vote on issues. So can you tell me a little bit about how you sort of transitioned from, or what ideas within liquid democracy you transitioned from to where you got to eventually?
Yeah, absolutely. So we call Flux, we refer to as an issue-based direct democracy. And so we still have, we still use those elements of liquid democracy. So part of Flux is that you can allocate your vote to somebody else to make decisions on your behalf, which we think is a really, really important aspect. And the foundations that liquid democracy made, really has led to that iteration. But what we felt was missing is that even someone who particularly may have a really a great interest in politics and have the time committed to understanding that, and then represent other people on their behalf in politics, may not necessarily be still the best person suited for every single issue. And that's what we find now in politics today, is that when we elect representatives, where we elect people as policy generalists. Okay, they go into a party, and that party together start forming policy on a wide range of issues. And these people aren't specifically experts or specialists in the field they end up casting a vote on. So we identify this as a problem, and throughout history, people have tried to solve this problem by creating technocracies where you have groups of specialists that make these decisions.
Yeah, sure.
The problem that you have there is that that's not necessarily a democratic process. When you install these kind of technocrats to do this kind of stuff, I think people in Europe right now are largely having this kind of problem where they're saying, well, we've created this bureaucracy with all these technocrats and it's not very democratic. So Flux is a system that allows people to not just delegate their votes to others, but also to abstain from voting, and by doing that accumulate a sort of political capital that they can use on votes that they do care more about. Yeah. So the way that works is everyone gets a vote on every single issue. I can cast it yes or no. I can give it to someone else whom I trust to cast that vote on my behalf, or if it's something that I really have absolutely no interest in whatsoever, I just let it go. And what happens is my vote then can be traded away for a point that I can then use to apply someone else's vote on another issue. Now, this is something that, at first glance, a lot of people say, whoa, that's crazy, we can't do that, everyone's got to vote on everything. I said, well, why does everyone need to vote on everything? I mean, there are a wide range of issues that I wouldn't know the first thing about, and it makes no sense for me to cast a vote on that issue. On the other hand, there are things I'm deeply passionate about that I would like to really be able to have my fair share of involvement in. What this does is it enables people who are passionate about their policy areas or their industries or the things that are most pertinent to their own lives to be able to participate on those things and actually develop a great understanding and get involved. And it's going to enable people who currently aren't too interested in politics to actually want to be involved, because the expectation isn't, hey, you need to know all about politics. It's like, well, no, just know what you know about. Like, just be good at what you're particularly good at and get involved for the betterment of your community in that particular policy area. So we end up with a system whereby naturally and democratically, the people who are best suited to making the decisions, again, via this mechanism of liquid democracy, best suited to making specific decisions, wind up making those decisions, and the decision makers change with every issue. For example, if I'm passionate about the environment, but I'm not an environmental scientist. I'm just someone who really cares that understands we have to fix the environment and we have some major challenges. Perhaps as an environmental scientist who I follow, and that person is quite outspoken, they have some great ideas. They're not a politician, but by virtue of the fact that they're a specialist in their field, others want to support them and support their ideas. And so I give my vote to that person. And perhaps when a bill comes up that's around regulating the medical industry, that person abstains their vote and basically obtains the right to participate to a greater extent when an issue that's around the environment comes up. So that's the general gist of Flux, and the difference between Flux and liquid democracy is this idea that in addition to be able to delegate your vote, you can also trade votes, and in so really build a society where the best people suited to making a decision are the ones who make the decision.
Okay, yeah, wow, that is different. There are variations in liquid democracy that allow similar things, but that's very specific, I guess. So it's a very specific kind of intention that you have around specialized intelligences that are accessed within the community to deal with particular decisions.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that what we're trying to do here is to say that anybody can get involved in politics because now the barrier isn't so high. You can ask, you can have a conversation with just about anybody, and there'll be some aspect of political life they'll be able to tell you about, even if it's a very narrow one. So it's about saying that whatever that is for you, get involved there. And I generally believe that when you have a society that's given that responsibility, that sort of social responsibility, then we will see not just a change in politics, but a change in society as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I've noticed is that the people involved in liquid democracy in Germany are carrying a different cultural attitude towards politics. They're actually, um, engaged at a granular level with issues and with discussions and policy areas, and you don't have what you have right now, where a person shows up every 3 or 4 years and puts a thing in a box, and then they don't think about it for another 3 or 4 years. So
Yeah.
it is culturally quite different, I think, these sorts of forms. Can I ask you about the? I want to know a little bit about how you became a party. So some of the history,
Yep.
um, and how difficult was that? And then maybe following on from that, then how does it work? Then do I join your party, and then I get access to your system or whatnot? So is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So uh, the party, the whole idea. I mean, you know, we we have this idea, right? And you say, okay, well, here's this new model of democracy. We would like to see this get instantiated. What is the best way to do that?
Hmm.
And there is a commercial aspect to Flux as well, which has sort of enabled us to raise some money and hopefully be able to raise some more money so we can continue doing this without having to rely on donation, which can be exceptionally difficult, given that most of the voting public is not particularly. Everyone will tell you that there's a problem with democracy and that politicians suck and rah rah rah, but not that many people are ready to sort of jump behind and actually start making a change happen. But for the most part, it was sort of saying, well, the government is not going to necessarily say, oh my gosh, yeah, we need a new voting system and we should definitely all put ourselves out of a job because we're not doing a very good one. They're not going to do that. And so we need a way to be able to sort of inject this idea into politics in a way that we can sort of start on a very sort of granular level and build up and build up. And that was where the idea for the party came from. If we get someone elected, then we can start demonstrating how the system works. We can gain popularity, and in successive elections, then this movement will gain some serious traction. In order to set the party up, how difficult was it? It was for us. I mean, it felt difficult at the time. When you've never set up a political party before, it's like, okay, this is crazy. Certainly, the bureaucracy is incredibly clunky and makes things very, very difficult. And there are a lot of regulations and rules in setting up a party that are just insanely archaic and, quite frankly, nonsense. But for the most part, it was not as hard as some people might think. We sort of leveraged the internet a whole lot to start the party, and we got a lot of press very early on as sort of being the party that started on Facebook. ABC ran a thing and Hack, and Anthony Green, who's a very well-known commentator here, even commented like, well, now it's just so easy to start a political party. If you can just start one online, and that's basically what we did. We ran Facebook ads. You need 500 members. We went for 550 because there's a bit of a buffer there that gives you a bit of room to move. We got our 550 members in a few weeks after running some Facebook ads, and we submitted that to the AEC, and away you go. So there's a waiting period where people can object.
Yeah.
No one objected, and we were a party.
Yeah.
Now, as for what participation looks like, so at present the software, we haven't deployed the software, and we're still working on that. The technology aspect of the whole equation, because we felt it was more important to focus on the last federal election and getting a seat than to sort of have the technology ready but not have any representation. As it turns out, we didn't win a seat, so now we're pivoting and we're working on the tech. But the idea is that once someone's elected, you won't need to be a member of the party. So it'll be open to any voting age Australian citizen, and it'll also be like, for instance, let's say you're elected to the Senate at a federal level, it won't be state specific. So if we had, say, someone from New South Wales elected to the Senate, that senator would represent the entire country at a federal level, if that makes sense. So that was really important to us because we didn't want to, a federal election comes around every 3 years. We didn't want to exclude people from one part of the country just because the senator was only elected in this part of the country. That being said, obviously for state elections, things will be different. So if we're talking about a state election in WA, for instance, which we've got in March of next year, only WA residents will be able to vote against that person's vote, because naturally those issues are only pertinent to WA. But the idea is everyone's got an app on their phone. Every time a piece of legislation comes before that particular House of Parliament, that bill will go out to everyone's phone as a notification, and you'll be able to cast your vote, abstain, or divert it to somebody else.
Okay, so just sort of trying to get some clarification. So a person, by becoming part of the party, would have, and this is still in the future because you're still working it out, but you're getting the technology sorted out. But a person would be updated on an issue and would have a chance to vote on that issue electronically as a party, basically.
So not so much as a party. So you don't have to be a member of the party to participate, and that's something that we feel is really important, because we just want there to be as low a barrier as possible to participation. So we want to encourage people to become members of the party, because it grows the movement. It also encourages others to sort of get involved with the movement as the numbers of the party sort of swell. I mean, we've managed to get more than 4,500 members now, which, by comparison, the Greens have about 14,000 members. So that's, pretty big numbers comparatively for a minor party. But essentially we would vote as a block. So if we've got, one member in Parliament and, that's all we have, then it's, basically a majority, they're 51% versus 49, and that's the way it goes. But it's also proportional. So if we have more than one member and it's sort of a 49-51 situation, then one would vote yes and one would vote no.
Okay. The
idea being that no matter which way you vote, you're going to be represented. We want to try and represent as many people as possible, and that's the strength of the system. And we really think that once we start demonstrating this, it's going to be irresistible basically to anyone, for several reasons. One, because you actually get a say, but second of all, because if your political opposition is participating in this system, you're forced to also participate in it. And so it's a sort of mechanism to encourage others to join. So that's roughly the idea, yeah.
Okay. So you said that you don't have to be a party member to vote in Voteflux. Let's say an issue comes up. Let's say the issue of, it's on the right for, gays and lesbians to marry. And the issue comes up. I see it on my phone or my computer as an update. I don't have to be a party member to vote on an issue through Voteflux. Is that right?
Yeah, so via Flux, provided you're a registered voter in Australia, then you can jump on, use the app, and have your vote.
Okay.
And the aggregate of that vote will be actually cast by the member. Yeah.
And the aggregate of that vote will be cast by the member. So the member is legally bound to express the vote that was popularly made within the system.
Not legally. So this goes back to constitutional law, but you can't legally bind a member. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that was my question. Yeah. I mean, that was one of my questions, because in Germany, when I studied liquid democracy, that was one of the problems. Is even though you have a liquid democracy platform, constitutionally, those quote unquote representatives still have a right to exercise their quote unquote conscience.
Yes.
And that might be in contradiction to the people who are actually supporting them or who elected them.
Yes.
So that's quite interesting. Okay, so that's consistent with the German law and probably most Western democracies in general. That's a little. I mean, is that a problem in your eyes? Would you prefer if legally, constitutionally, and this kind of gets a little bit off track, but it's an interesting area. Would you prefer if the Voteflux community has said we want this, and now that representative is legally bound to actually express that same popular vote.
Well, I think sooner than legally bind a representative to do that, what we'd like to see would be to legally elect software, because that would just completely solve the problem. If you could say we're going to elect the Flux system directly, then
Right.
we just have like an LCD panel that sits in Parliament there, and it just has a big yay or nay every time there's a bill, and it's just a direct feed from the software.
Right. So why
Um,
have the person when you can
yeah, what
just
happened?
have you can have the what do you call it, the prop? Yeah.
Well, that's exactly. I mean, the end goal is that the Houses of Parliament are become a museum, because the conversation. Our goal is really here to try and have the conversations that right now happen, in the halls of Canberra, and have those conversations all over the country in meeting places, community halls, pubs, wherever it is. And so we're trying to take political discussion to a whole other level, from a social point of view. So yeah, I mean, it's if is it a problem? I would say it is a problem. It's probably one of the few problems that we think that we actually don't have a solution for, because it's a legislative requirement, and so there's nothing we can do at this point. So we just have to pick people who's number one, first and foremost, want to see a change in democracy. And I don't think that's too hard to find. Um, there's, I mean, if you get elected to do this job, there's a lot of personal responsibility on the line. You're in the public face now, and people have chosen you to do this. You can't turn around and say, well, stuff this, I'm not doing this anymore. There's a massive shot to your credibility publicly and personally when you do that kind of thing. So, the last federal election, we ran candidates all of whom were prepared to vote, against their own best interest, or what they thought might be best in favour of this system, because I understand the longevity of this system is going to be far more important than the odd vote here or there that they don't agree with. I mean, the cost benefit is just it's like this, like
Yeah.
it's not worth it.
Okay. So okay, got it. So that's interesting. So yeah. Okay. I mean, look, this is a problem that given the fast evolution of digital democracy systems and the very slow movement and changes within constitutional representative systems, it's they're kind of like rubbing up against each other, and there is no direct answer to it. But your answer to it is to elect people for the party who are going to be faithful to the principles of Voteflux.
Yeah, that's basically the idea. So there's just a strong belief there that the system, in the long run, will be far more important than what they think, and elect and also have others opt in. There's no reason that a sitting member for another party or an independent can't say, hey, I actually believe that we do need a better democracy, and I'm prepared to just forego what I think in favour of what the people think, and that's an option that we're looking at as well.
Okay. So that means you still elect representatives for Voteflux. How does that happen? Is that within the party in a live format, like the way that current parties operate, or are you actually using or plan to use the online platforms to elect representatives for the party?
Yeah, so we absolutely intend to use a democratic platform to nominate our candidates. That is something that we want to do. We didn't for the last federal election, mainly because we were such a small party, and
Mm-hmm.
at that point, it can be dangerous, I guess, to put the hands of such an important decision in like a very, very small group. As groups get larger, they become much better at making those kinds of decisions, which is why Flux will work excellently at a national level, but at a smaller level, it might not go. It might not produce necessarily the best result. So we so far have been just sort of taking a bit of a painstaking approach to just vetting candidates and making sure they're the right people and that their vision aligns with what we're trying to do. But in the long term, yeah, we want to see essentially the membership base be able to nominate candidates.
Okay, so you're as a party, you're able to with your. Is there an election process for the people who set up the party, or can the people who set up the party simply choose the candidates that they want? They're kind of like They're like year on year out on the party board or something like that.
Yeah, so legislatively speaking, party leadership is completely, there are several roles that are defined under legislation, registered officer, for instance,
Yeah,
and secretary, and basically those roles, and obviously there's a party constitution as well, which the party has to operate within, but that as well is written by, the registered officer and the secretary, and so how a party functions internally, legislatively, is pretty much completely up to those people.
I see. Okay. Okay. So
Um,
you don't have to vote for now. You don't have to vote for the party members. They can. You can basically say, well, we think these are the best people, but down the track, it's to have a digital platform for those nominations.
yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Cool. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Well, that answers a lot of questions. I mean, one of the challenges that liquid democracy has had in Germany is being able to interface with the existing constitutional system. And so the developers of liquid feedback actually didn't design it to actually work at a constitutional parliamentary level. They actually designed it to work within a party system so that the party could make decisions. But they still didn't resolve that issue of how do you bind those representatives to being faithful to that, and making it binding to begin with has been a challenge as well. So yeah, these are very similar challenges that you're sort of talking about. Um, okay, so I know you have to get going soon, so maybe if you can just provide me with two or three sort of ideas about where Voteflux is heading. What are some of the next steps in rolling it out and creating it, and what would you like to see in the next 2 to 5 years, say?
Yeah, so we're fairly. I would say we're fairly ambitious. We really see this as being a true solution to the problem of modern representative democracy. We are basically building the organisation in Australia to be able to contest every state and territory election between now and the next federal election, disregarding ACT, because we've sort of missed the boat on that one. But just being able to contest every single election, and the idea is in the next 12 months, we would love to see someone get up. If we can have someone get elected, then we can start demonstrating how this works at a political level. At the same time, we want to make the software available to other organisations, like charitable organisations, possibly even certain corporate structures, to also start demonstrating this technology and sort of getting some use case for why and how this system is a whole lot better than traditional models of decision making. So, our objective really, if we're talking about sort of 5 years, would be to see Flux being used at local and state level governments in this country, and also to see chapters of Flux having been founded and running campaigns in other countries. We're talking to folks in New Zealand, we're talking to folks in Southeast Asia, people from America have been in touch. So there's a lot of interest from other parts of the world, and this is something we definitely want to foster and grow. We don't necessarily see ourselves as being instrumental to all those organizations. We see it as being something that people will take and run with themselves. We'll provide the technology, and that technology will be free for anyone to pick up and start using if they want to found their own Flux party. But we would love to see this movement start growing internationally and really start replacing democracies. First on a local and state level, and then eventually on a federal level.
Great. Okay. Well, that's a really good wrap up. And yeah, I mean, I think what you're doing is great, and wish you all the best in creating that. And also, and I would probably add that there's lots of innovations happening in this area. There's the Lumio people from Inspiral and Wellington, and there's the liquid democracy experiments. There's stuff happening in Argentina. So I think it's really important to see all of these different efforts as part of an ecosystem that are supporting each other in bringing about a fundamental transformation in governance in many parts of the world. So hopefully a learning system globally that supports all of these different efforts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be interesting to see. I think the next few years is going to be very fascinating in this regard, because we're sort of reaching a point now where, I mean, collectively as around the world, we've kind of hit this point where the level of political frustration is just enough that we're all starting to say, hang on, there's got to be something better than this. And it's starting to happen. So I think it'll be very, very interesting to see in the next sort of, as you mentioned, 2 to 5 years' time where we sort of wind up and what it looks like. But it'll be an exciting time.
Yeah, cool. Thanks so much, Nate. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, Jose. It's a pleasure. Thank you, mate.
Okay.